Imagine this one moment you're battling the lunchtime rush, balancing plates and impossible demands. The next you're standing up to a man who could buy the entire city block on a whim. Isla, a waitress with dreams bigger than her tiny New York apartment, did just that. She told a billionaire to wait his turn. She expected to be fired to become a cautionary tale. Instead, hours later, a black car, sleeker than anything she'd ever seen, arrived with an invitation that would change her life, or possibly end it, a trip to a private, uncharted island. But paradise always has a price, and this invitation hid a secret far more shocking than she could ever imagine. The lunchtime symphony at Isla was a chaotic masterpiece Isla Vance conducted daily. Nestled in a ridiculously expensive corner of Manhattan, Isla wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater where the city's elite performed their power lunches and discreet rendezvous. Michelin stars clung to its name like barnacles to a luxury yacht, and the waiting list for a prime-time table stretched into the next fiscal quarter. Isla, with her art history degree gathering dust and her spirit perpetually frayed, was one of its many spear carriers, albeit one with an uncanny ability to remember who liked their San Pellegrino with a lime wedge versus a lemon slice, and who was dangerously allergic to the faintest whisper of truffle. Today the air was particularly charged. A food critic from a major publication was rumored to be dining incognito, sending waves of anxious energy through the usually unflappable staff. Isla, however, was more concerned with Table 7, where a woman was loudly complaining that her consommé wasn't transparent enough, and Table 12, which was rapidly descending into a drunken argument over cryptocurrency. Isla Pickup, Marco, the perpetually stressed maitre d', hissed as he sailed past his face, a mask of tortured hospitality. She balanced 3 plates laden with pan-seared scallops and saffron risotto on one arm, her smile firmly in place. Coming through. It was then, as she deftly sidestepped a rogue bread basket, that she saw them. A party of 3, cutting a swathe through the carefully curated chaos towards the maitre d's station. 2 were standard Aurelia fare men in bespoke suits, exuding an aura of unearned importance. The 3rd, however, was different. He wasn't as flashy dressed in a deceptively simple dark sweater and slacks, but there was an intensity about him, a stillness that drew the eye. His silver-streaked hair was casually swept back, and his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, seemed to absorb everything without giving anything away. Around his wrist, Isla noticed the subtle gleam of a Patek Philippe Nautilus, a watch that cost more than her annual salary. 10 times over. This had to be Julian Croft. The name had been whispered in hushed, reverent tones among the staff for weeks. Croft, a tech mogul turned venture capitalist, was a legend, a recluse, a man whose decisions could reshape industries. He was also notoriously impatient and demanding. Marco was already bowing so low, he risked a spinal injury. Mr. Croft, what an unexpected honor. We weren't expecting you until 2. Marco gushed his voice several octaves higher than usual. Croft's voice, when it came, was quiet, but carried the unmistakable weight of command. My schedule cleared. I require a table now. It wasn't a request. Marco wrung his hands. Of course, sir, absolutely. It's just, we are fully committed. Every table. He gestured helplessly at the bustling room. Then uncommit one. One of Croft's companions, a younger man with slicked-back hair and an air of bored arrogance, said with a sneer. Isla, having just deposited her plates and en route to fetch a fresh pepper grinder, found her path momentarily blocked by this tableau of entitlement. She tried to sidestep, but Croft's other associate, a woman with a severe haircut and an even more severe expression, shifted effectively, boxing her in. "Perhaps," Croft said, his gaze sweeping the room. Landing on a prime window table where an elderly couple were leisurely enjoying their dessert. "That one." Marco turned an alarming shade of puce. "Sir, the Astors, they are very loyal patrons. They booked months in advance." "Loyalty is a commendable trait," Croft murmured, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, "until it becomes an inconvenience." That was it. Something snapped in Ilara. Maybe it was the critic. Maybe it was the consommé lady. Maybe it was the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of the man who thought his whims outweighed common decency. Or maybe it was just the exhaustion of constantly being made to feel small. Taking a small, steadying breath, she stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir." All three heads turned towards her. Marco looked like he was about to faint. Croft's stormy eyes narrowed slightly, focusing on her, a mere waitress daring to interrupt. "I apologize for the inconvenience," Ilara said, her voice clear and surprisingly steady. "But Aurelia operates on a reservation basis for all our guests. Mr. Marco has a waiting list, and I'm sure he'd be happy to add your name. There might be a cancellation." She even managed a polite, professional smile. The silence that followed was thick enough to spread on toast. Croft's companions looked utterly aghast. The slick-haired man opened his mouth, then closed it, apparently too stunned to form words. The severe woman's eyes were like ice chips. Marco whimpered softly, a small, trapped sound. Julian Croft, however, simply tilted his head, his expression unreadable. He studied Ilara for a long moment, his gaze intense, almost analytical. She felt like a specimen under a microscope, but she held her ground, refusing to fidget or look away. She'd said her piece. The consequences could come later. She had rent to pay and a mountain of student debt, but there were lines even desperation wouldn't let her cross. Finally, he spoke, his voice still quiet, but with an edge now. "And you are Ilara Vance, sir. I'm one of the servers here." "Ilara Vance." He repeated the name, rolling off his tongue as if tasting it. "You believe I should wait? Everyone who wishes to dine at Aurelia without a prior booking waits, sir," she stated calmly. "Or they make a reservation for another time. It's our policy. It ensures fairness to all our patrons." The slick-haired man finally found his voice. "Do you have any idea who this is?" he spluttered, jabbing a finger towards Croft. "He doesn't wait." "Here he does," Ilara said, her gaze still locked with Croft's. She saw a flicker in his eyes. Surprise, annoyance, or something else entirely. Another beat of silence, then to everyone's the utter astonishment. The ghost of a smile touched Julian Croft's lips. Again this time, a little more defined. It wasn't warm, not exactly, but it wasn't entirely cold either. "Fairness," he mused. "A novel concept in my world." He looked at Marco, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 2 minutes. "Marco, it appears your Miss Vance has the situation well in hand. We'll wait, perhaps for that cancellation." Marco's jaw practically hit the polished marble floor. Croft's companions looked equally poleaxed. Ilara herself felt a wave of dizziness. Had he actually? Agreed Croft, then turned his piercing gaze back to Ilara. For now. With that, he and his entourage moved not towards the exit, but to the small, already crowded bar area, much to the visible discomfort of the patrons already squeezed in there. Julian Croft, a man who could buy countries, leaned against the lacquered bar, ordered a mineral water, and proceeded to wait his eyes occasionally, thoughtfully drifting towards Isla as she resumed her duties, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She expected the axe to fall any minute. A summons to Marco's office, a curt dismissal. Surely her defiance wouldn't go unpunished. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of forced smiles and trembling hands. She avoided eye contact with Croft, though she could feel his gaze on her like a physical touch every time she passed the bar. He and his party didn't get a table. After about 45 minutes, during which he nursed his single water and spoke to no one, he simply stood, gave a curt nod in no particular direction, and swept out his companions, scrambling in his wake. Isla breathed a sigh of shaky relief. Maybe he'd just decided it wasn't worth the trouble. Maybe she'd dodged a cannonball. As she cleared tables, reset cutlery, and placated a chef furious about the critic potentially witnessing the earlier scene, she tried to push Julian Croft from her mind. Just another rich eccentric, an unpleasant, stressful blip in an already challenging day. By the time she clocked out, exhaustion had settled deep in her bones. The city lights felt harsh, the subway ride home an ordeal. All she wanted was a hot shower and the oblivion of sleep. She was still replaying the encounter in her mind, half proud of her stand, half terrified of the potential delayed repercussions. Had she been a fool? Or had she for once done something unequivocally right regardless of the cost? She reached her cramped walk-up apartment in Queens, the scent of her neighbor's spicy cooking, a familiar comfort. As she fumbled for her keys, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A restricted number. Probably a telemarketer. She ignored it. Inside, she dropped her bag, kicked off her sensible work shoes, and leaned against the door, finally allowing herself to sag. It buzzed again, and again. Annoyed, she pulled it out. Another restricted call, then a text message from an unknown number. Ms. Vance, a car is waiting for you downstairs. Please come down. It concerns Mr. Julian Croft. Ila's blood ran cold. This was it. The summons. He was going to sue her or have her blacklisted from every restaurant in the city. Her legs felt like lead, but a grim sense of inevitability propelled her to the window. Peering through the grimy glass down to the street, 5 stories below, she saw it. Not just any car. A sleek black Maybach, its tinted windows reflecting the streetlight utterly out of place in her working-class neighborhood. It idled silently, a panther in the urban jungle waiting. For her. Ila's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, unnerving silence of her apartment. A Maybach, downstairs, for her. It was the kind of vehicle that usually heralded the arrival of royalty or the villain in a spy movie, not a debt-ridden waitress who'd just had the audacity to tell its owner to queue. Her first instinct was fear, sharp and cold. This was it, the retribution. She imagined being whisked away to some sterile office, facing a phalanx of lawyers, her small act of defiance dissected and magnified until it crushed her. Or worse, the rich and powerful had ways of making problems disappear. What if Marco had already fired her and this was some overly dramatic corporate-style exit interview? She thought of ignoring it, pretending she hadn't seen the text, hadn't seen the car. But the sheer audacity of it, sending a Maybach to her doorstep, suggested they wouldn't be easily dissuaded. They knew where she lived. A different, more insidious thought began to creep in curiosity. Why a Maybach? Why the personal summons? If Croft wanted her fired, a simple phone call to Aurelia's management would suffice. This felt disproportionate. Her hand hovered over her phone. Should she call Marco? Her best friend Chloe, who'd probably tell her this was the beginning of a bizarre rom-com no. This was something she had to face herself. Taking a deep breath, she texted back a single cautious word. Why? The reply was almost instantaneous. Mr. Croft wishes to speak with you. It is a matter of some urgency and discretion. You will not be harmed. You have my word. Eleanor Vance. No relation, executive assistant to Mr. Croft. Eleanor Vance. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Then she remembered the severe woman with the sharp haircut at the restaurant. Executive assistant. So not a direct summons from the man himself, but through his formidable gatekeeper. The assurance "you will not be harmed" was hardly reassuring. It was the kind of thing people said before things went terribly wrong. Yet what choice did she have? Hiding would only prolong the inevitable and perhaps make things worse. Her shift wasn't for another 12 hours. With a surge of something that felt like fatalistic courage, she typed back, "I'll be down in 5 minutes." She splashed water on her face, changed out of her work clothes into the most presentable jeans and sweater she owned, and grabbed her worn leather satchel. Stuffing her phone wallet and a tattered paperback into it, a flimsy shield against the unknown. Her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror showed a pale, wide-eyed young woman who looked like she was heading to an interrogation, not a mysterious meeting. Downstairs, the Maybach hummed softly, its presence attracting curious glances from her neighbors, peeking through their blinds. As she approached the rear door, opened silently, as if by magic. Inside, bathed in the soft glow of ambient lighting, sat Eleanor Vance. Up close, her features were less severe. More tired, perhaps. She offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Miss Vance, thank you for coming." Her voice was crisp, professional. Elara slid into the door, closing with a muted thud, sealing her off from the familiar sounds of her street. The interior smelled of expensive leather and something vaguely like cedarwood. It was more spacious than her entire bedroom. "Where are we going?" Elara asked, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "To a more private location to discuss Mr. Croft's proposal." Eleanor replied, her eyes fixed on a tablet in her lap. "It's a short drive." Proposal. Elara's mind raced. A proposal for what? A gag order. A demand for a public apology. She couldn't imagine anything else. The drive was indeed short, though it felt like an eternity to Elara. They navigated the city streets with an eerie smoothness, the cacophony of New York muted to a distant hum. They pulled up before a discreet, unmarked building in a very wealthy, very quiet part of Midtown, one Elara had only ever admired from afar. A doorman, almost invisible until he moved, opened the car door. Eleanor led her through a silent, opulent lobby, its marble floors reflecting their images like a still, dark lake. An elevator, all polished brass and dark wood, whisked them upwards with disconcerting speed. Elara felt a pressure in her ears. They stopped, and the doors opened not onto a hallway, but directly into a sprawling penthouse apartment. The view was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed a panorama of the glittering Manhattan skyline, a carpet of diamonds laid out at their feet. The apartment itself was a masterpiece of minimalist luxury. Vast, open spaces, museum-quality art on the walls, furniture that looked more like sculpture than something one would actually sit on. And there, standing by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, was Julian Croft. He turned as they entered, his expression just as unreadable as it had been in the restaurant. He was still in the same dark sweater and slacks, but in this setting it looked less like casual attire and more like a deliberate statement of understated power. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice smoother, less clipped than before. "Thank you for accepting my rather abrupt invitation." Elara swallowed. "I wasn't aware I had much of a choice, Mr. Croft." A faint smile touched his lips. "There's always a choice, Elara. May I call you Elara?" She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. "You chose to address me in my restaurant. You chose to come down to the car. You chose to come up here. Choices define us, don't they?" Eleanor Vance had discreetly positioned herself near the entrance, a silent sentinel. "Would you care for a drink?" Croft gestured towards a well-stocked bar that looked like it belonged in a 5-star hotel. "Water. Something stronger." "Water would be fine, thank you." Elara managed her throat dry. He poured it himself from a crystal decanter into a heavy glass and handed it to her. His fingers brushed hers for a fleeting second, and an unexpected jolt like static electricity passed between them. Elara pulled her hand back quickly. "Please sit." He indicated a low-slung sofa that probably cost more than her car. She perched on the edge of it, feeling utterly out of place. Croft remained standing, swirling the liquid in his glass. "Your actions at Aurelia today were noteworthy." Here it comes, she thought. The lecture, the dismissal. "You displayed a level of conviction, integrity perhaps, a rare commodity." He took a sip of his drink, especially when dealing with individuals of my stature. Elara frowned. "I just believe rules should apply to everyone, Mr. Croft. It's how I was raised." "A commendable upbringing," he said, his eyes searching hers. "Tell me, Elara, are you happy at Aurelia slinging scallops and placating difficult patrons?" The question caught her off guard. "It's a job. It pays the bills, mostly. But does it fulfill you? Do you dream of a career in hospitality, of one day managing your own Aurelia?" Elara thought of her dusty art history degree, her abandoned sketches, the faint lingering scent of turpentine that always made her nostalgic. "No, sir, not particularly." "Then what do you dream of, Elara Vance?" His voice was soft, almost hypnotic. She hesitated. Why was he asking her this? Was this some sort of bizarre psychological game? I'm not sure that's any of your concern." "Mr. Croft." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Perhaps, but humor me." "I wanted to be an art curator," she said quietly, the admission feeling strangely vulnerable. "Or work in art restoration. Something to do with preserving beauty, I suppose." She hadn't voiced that dream aloud in years. Croft nodded slowly. "A noble pursuit. Yet here you are in a city that chews up dreams and spits them out as, what, regret resignation." "I'm a realist, Mr. Croft," Elara said, a defensive edge creeping into her tone. "Some dreams aren't practical." "Practicality is often the enemy of greatness," he countered. He paused, then fixed her with that intense gaze again. "I have a proposition for you, Elara, one that is far from practical perhaps, but one that might align more closely with preserving beauty, or at least experiencing it." Elara waited, her apprehension mounting. "I own a private island in the Grenadines. It's called Serafina Isle. It is, by most standards, a paradise." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm leaving tomorrow morning. I would like you to accompany me." Elara stared at him, speechless. This had to be a joke. A cruel, elaborate prank. Accompany you, why? Let's call it an extended conversation, an opportunity, a change of scenery from the demanding diners of Aurelia. As what, Mr. Croft? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Your waitress? The implications hung heavy in the air. She thought of the way men like him sometimes treated women like her, as disposable decorative. His expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed to darken. As my guest, Ms. Vance. Purely as my guest. I assure you my intentions are entirely investigative. Investigative? That was an odd choice of words. Investigating what? Character, he said simply. Yours primarily, and perhaps the nature of opportunity itself. He gestured around the opulent room. I live in a world of sycophants, Ilara. People who tell me what they think I want to hear. People who would sell their grandmothers for a fraction of what this apartment is worth. Your defiance today, your simple insistence on fairness. It was like a breath of fresh air in a very stale room. Ilara was struggling to process this, an invitation to a private island. From a billionaire she'd effectively insulted hours ago, because she'd stood up to him. It sounded like the plot of a bad romance novel or a very sophisticated con. I don't understand, she said. What would be expected of me? To be yourself, Croft replied. To observe, to converse, to experience something different. No obligations, no strings attached, a week, all expenses paid, of course, and a generous inconvenience fee for your time, regardless of how long you choose to stay, even if it's just for a day. He named a sum that made Ilara's eyes widen. It was more than she made in 6 months. And if I say no, then Eleanor will ensure you are returned home safely, and you will receive a smaller, though still significant token for your trouble this evening. And I will assume your display at Aurelia was merely an anomaly. The unspoken implication was that he would be disappointed. Ilara looked from Croft to the impassive Eleanor Vance, then out at the glittering, indifferent city. Her life was a relentless cycle of bills, sore feet, and forgotten dreams. What did she have to lose, really? Her dead-end job, her cramped apartment. The risk was enormous, the unknown terrifying. But the alternative, returning to her life as if this bizarre interlude had never happened, suddenly felt unbearable. Was this man dangerous? Almost certainly. Was he eccentric? Undeniably. Was he offering her something that could irrevocably change her life, for better or worse? Yes. This island, Serafina Isle, she said slowly. What's it like? A genuine smile finally reached Julian Croft's eyes. It's a place where the impossible feels possible, you'll see. He extended a hand. Do we have an accord, Ilara Vance? Her mind screamed 1,000 warnings, yet a reckless, adventurous spirit she thought had died long ago flickered to life. She thought of the Patek Philippe on his wrist, a symbol of a world so far removed from her own. What if just for a week she could glimpse it? Slowly she reached out and shook his hand. His grip was firm, cool. All right, Mr. Croft, I'll go to your island. Excellent, he said, his smile widening. Eleanor will handle the arrangements. Pack light. We leave at dawn. As Eleanor escorted her back to the Maybach, no longer to her humble queen's apartment, but to a luxurious suite at the St. Regis Hotel that had been prearranged, Ilara felt like she'd stepped through the looking glass. The inconvenience fee, he'd mentioned, was already in a crisp envelope on the polished mahogany desk. The sheer speed and efficiency of it all were disorienting. Hours ago she was worried about being fired. Now she was preparing to fly to a private Caribbean island with a billionaire whose motives were as opaque as the tinted windows of his limousine. The only certainty was that her life, as she knew it, was already over. The journey to Serafina Isle was a masterclass in seamless, almost surreal luxury. Ilara, who considered splurging on extra legroom a major travel coup, found herself on a Gulfstream G650, its interior resembling a high-tech boutique hotel suite more than an aircraft. Julian Croft was a quiet companion, during the flight engrossed in papers or staring out the window. Though Ilara occasionally caught him observing her with that same analytical gaze, she was beginning to find both unnerving and intriguing. Eleanor Vance was efficiency personified, coordinating everything with quiet clicks on her tablet, a silent conductor of their airborne orchestra. They landed on a private airstrip carved into the lush greenery of an island that seemed to shimmer in the turquoise expanse of the Caribbean Sea. Serafina Isle. Even its name sounded like a whisper from a dream. As Ilara stepped off the jet, the air hit her. Warm, fragrant with unknown blossoms and the clean tang of salt. Palm trees swayed gently their fronds, a vibrant green against a sky of impossible blue. The beach, a crescent of pristine white sand, met water so clear it looked like liquid crystal. Awaiting them was a small electric vehicle and a smiling woman with kind eyes and skin the color of warm honey dressed in a simple, elegant linen tunic. "Welcome to Serafina Isle, Mr. Croft, Miss Vance," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "I am Isola, your island hostess." The main residence, if it could be called that, was less a house and more a collection of beautifully designed pavilions, seamlessly integrated into the landscape. Open-air living spaces flowed into private suites, all crafted from natural wood, stone, and glass, offering breathtaking views of the ocean or the island's verdant interior. There were no visible staff yet. Everything was immaculate, anticipates, and catered for. Meals appeared as if by magic. Fresh, delicious, tailored to preferences Croft had somehow divined. Her suite was larger than her entire New York apartment, with a private plunge pool and a veranda that opened directly onto a secluded stretch of beach. It was paradise, undeniably. Yet an undercurrent of unease hummed beneath the surface for Ilara. This level of perfection felt constructed, artificial. Croft, in this new environment, seemed different. More relaxed, perhaps, though the intensity in his eyes never truly dimmed. He wore simple linen shirts and shorts, walked barefoot on the sand, and swam in the ocean with a surprising athleticism. He encouraged Ilara to explore, to swim, to read, to simply be. "There are no schedules here, Ilara," he told her one morning as they sat on the veranda, sipping freshly squeezed mango juice. "No demands, except perhaps one I ask for your honest observations." "Observations about what, Mr. Croft?" "Call me Julian," he corrected gently. "Observations about anything. The island, me, yourself, this situation." Their conversations were an odd mix of the profound and the mundane. He asked about her childhood, her abandoned artistic ambitions, her views on wealth, poverty, and the responsibilities that came with privilege. He listened more than he spoke, his questions always probing, always designed to make her think, to reveal herself. Ilara, in turn, found herself surprisingly candid. There was something about the isolation, the sheer unreality of the place that loosened her tongue. She spoke of her frustration with the art world's elitism, her quiet anger at the systemic inequalities she witnessed daily, her longing for a life with more meaning than just survival. One afternoon, while exploring a hidden cove, Ilara stumbled upon a small, weathered stone chapel, clearly very old, nestled amongst a grove of ancient banyan trees. It was simple, almost stark, but possessed a profound sense of peace. Inside, surprisingly, there were recent subtle signs of use. A few fresh flowers in a simple vase, a well-worn book of poetry left on a pew. When she mentioned it to Julian later, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. "Ah, you found the old chapel. It's been here for centuries, a relic of the island's first settlers. It feels different from the rest of the island," Elara observed. "More real, somehow." He looked out at the ocean. Perfection can be a gilded cage, Elara. Sometimes imperfection's history, even sadness, are what give a place its soul. There were other subtle oddities. Occasionally, Elara would glimpse other people in the distance, groundskeepers perhaps, or maintenance staff. But they would melt away before she could get a closer look. Eleanor Vance was a constant, discreet presence, always working on her tablet, always available, yet revealing nothing. And then there was Julian himself. He was a gracious host, attentive, even charming in his own reserved way. But there were moments when a shadow would cross his face, a deep, almost melancholic weariness in his eyes that made Elara wonder about the life he led beyond this idyllic retreat. One evening, a small, informal dinner was arranged on the beach. Lanterns cast a warm glow on the sand, and the sound of the waves provided a soothing soundtrack. It was just the two of them. "Tell me, Elara," Julian said, swirling wine in his glass. "If you had unlimited resources, what would you do? With your art history background, your desire to preserve beauty." Elara thought for a moment. "I wouldn't just buy famous paintings to hang on a rich man's wall," she said, perhaps a little more pointedly than she intended. "I'd fund artists who are struggling, the ones with raw talent, but no connections. I'd create accessible public art spaces, especially in underserved communities. I'd work to repatriate stolen artifacts. And I'd invest in art education, try to make it less exclusive." Julian listened intently, a small smile playing on his lips. Ambitious and admirable. It's easy to have admirable ambitions when you're not the one with unlimited resources, Elara said, a touch of her old cynicism surfacing. "Is that what you think this is about?" he asked, his gaze direct. "A rich man's game. A test to see if the waitress has a heart of gold." Elara flushed slightly. "Isn't it? You said yourself you were investigating character." "I am," he admitted, "but perhaps not in the way you imagine." He paused, looking out at the darkening sea. "I once knew someone very much like you, Elara. Someone who believed in fairness, who possessed an unshakable integrity, who saw beauty in unexpected places." His voice had a different timbre now, softer tinged with a sadness that resonated with the old chapel she'd found. "What happened to them?" she asked gently. Julian was silent for a long moment. The world, or perhaps my world, changed them, or they allowed it to. The clarity they once had became clouded by complexities, compromises. He looked back at her, his eyes holding a profound sorrow. "I've spent a long time wondering if that kind of intrinsic integrity can survive exposure to extreme wealth and power, or if it's inevitably eroded." Elara felt a shift in the atmosphere. This wasn't just an eccentric billionaire's whim. This was personal, deeply personal. The paradise of Serafina Isle suddenly felt less like a playground and more like a crucible. A few days into her stay, another guest arrived unannounced. Elara was reading on her veranda when a sleek helicopter, far larger than the one that might be used for simple island transport, descended onto a helipad she hadn't noticed before, tucked away on a far bluff. Later that day, Julian introduced her to Mr. Kaito Tanaka, an older, distinguished Japanese gentleman with an impeccably calm demeanor and eyes that seemed to see everything. He was, Julian explained, a long-time business associate and friend. Tanaka-san was polite, almost deferential to Elara, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being scrutinized by him as well, his quiet observations adding another layer to Julian's enigmatic investigation. The dynamic shifted. Conversations became more nuanced, sometimes involving Tanaka-san, who would pose subtle, almost philosophical questions. One evening he asked Elara about her definition of value. "Is it monetary?" Tanaka-san queried, his English precise. "Or is it in the intangible, the unique, the irreplaceable Elara thinking of her art history, background, and the way the art market often inflated prices based on hype rather than intrinsic merit, found herself drawn into a complex discussion. I think true value lies in things that can't be easily replicated or bought," she argued. "Integrity, for instance, or a unique perspective, the skill of an artisan honed over decades." Julian watched them, a thoughtful expression on his face. The next day, Eleanor Vance approached Elara with an unusual request. "Mr. Croft and Mr. Tanaka are engaged in some rather sensitive business discussions for the next 24 hours. Ms. Vance, they felt it might be an opportune moment for you to experience a different facet of the island, should you wish." She then outlined a proposal, a solo excursion with a guide to the undeveloped northern part of Serafina Isle, a place of rugged beauty, hidden waterfalls and challenging hikes. "It is quite remote," Eleanor cautioned, "but Mr. Croft thought your adventurous spirit might appreciate it. Of course you are free to decline." A solo excursion while Julian and his associate were busy. It felt strange. Was this another test, a way to see how she behaved when unsupervised, or simply a polite way of getting her out of the way? The adventurous spirit comment felt pointed, referencing her earlier statements about wanting more from life. "Who would be my guide?" Elara asked. "A local man named Kai," Eleanor replied. "He knows the island better than anyone. He's very experienced." Despite a nagging feeling of unease, the prospect of exploring the wilder side of Serafina Isle, away from the curated perfection of the main compound, was undeniably appealing. It felt like a chance to breathe, to see something raw and untamed. "All right," Elara said. "I'll go." Eleanor nodded. "Excellent. Kai will meet you at the boathouse at 8 tomorrow morning. Please wear comfortable hiking attire." As Elara prepared for bed that night, the sound of the waves seemed louder, more insistent. The paradise of Serafina Isle was beginning to show its complexities. Julian Croft's motives remained shrouded in mystery. Tanaka-san's arrival had added another layer of intrigue, and the upcoming solo excursion felt like a deliberate move in a game whose rules Elara still didn't understand. She was a long way from Aurelia, and the stakes she sensed were far higher than just a week in paradise. The gilded cage was beautiful, but she was starting to wonder what lay beyond its bars and why she was really here. The northern tip of Serafina Isle was a stark contrast to the manicured luxury of Julian Croft's compound. Here the island showed its wild, untamed heart. Jagged volcanic cliffs plunged into churning turquoise waters. Ancient trees draped in vines formed dense canopies, and the air was alive with the calls of unseen birds and the roar of hidden waterfalls. Kai, her guide, was a man of few words, but immense presence. His weathered face and calloused hands spoke of a life lived in harmony with nature, his eyes holding the calm wisdom of the sea and the forest. He moved through the challenging terrain with an effortless grace that Ilara, despite her decent fitness, struggled to emulate. He led her along narrow, overgrown trails, pointing out rare orchids, medicinal plants, and ancient petroglyphs carved into moss-covered rocks, remnants of the island's earliest inhabitants. There was no artifice here, no attempt to impress. It was raw, beautiful, and demanding. As they navigated a particularly steep ascent, Kai paused, offering Ilara a canteen of fresh water. Croft, he does not often allow guests to this part of the island. Kai observed his voice a low rumble. It is sacred to him. Sacred, Ilara panted, taking a grateful sip. Why? Kai gestured towards the panoramic view unfolding before them. The vast, untamed ocean meeting the rugged coastline. This is where he comes to remember, to think, away from the noise of his other world. Remember what Ilara wondered. The woman he'd spoken of. The one whose integrity had been compromised. Their destination was a secluded waterfall, a breathtaking cascade of crystalline water, plunging into a deep emerald pool, hidden within a natural amphitheater of rock and lush foliage. It was a place of profound, almost spiritual beauty. As Ilara swam in the cool, refreshing water, a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years settled over her. This, she thought, was real. This was the kind of beauty she'd always yearned to be close to. Later, as they ate a simple lunch of fresh fruit and grilled fish that Kai had expertly prepared, Ilara asked, Kai, you've known Mr. Croft for a long time. Kai nodded. Since he first found this island many years ago, before it was Serafina. What was it like before? Wilder. Simpler. He bought it piece by piece from many small owners. Some said he was foolish paying so much for untamed land, but he saw something others did not. Kai looked directly at Ilara. He sees things in people too, things they may not see in themselves. His words lingered in Ilara's mind as they made the trek back, the afternoon sun beginning to dip towards the horizon. Was Julian Croft seeing something in her? And if so, what was his ultimate purpose? When she returned to the compound, weary but invigorated, the atmosphere was palpably different. The air of relaxed leisure was gone, replaced by a quiet hum of tension. Eleanor Vance met her, her expression even more guarded than usual. Vance, Mr. Croft would like to see you in his study, she said, her tone formal. Julian's study was another marvel of design, a circular room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves with a massive antique wooden desk overlooking the ocean. But today, the breathtaking view was obscured by drawn blinds. Julian Croft stood by the desk, not looking at the sea, but at a small framed photograph. Mr. Tanaka was seated in one of the leather armchairs, his hands resting on his knees, his face impassive. Ilara, Julian said, turning. His face was etched with a weariness that seemed to go bone deep. Thank you for joining us. How was your excursion? It was incredible, Julian, she said sincerely. The waterfall, it was one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. A faint smile touched his lips. I'm glad. It's a special place. He paused, then gestured to the photograph he'd been holding. This was my wife, Livia. Ilara's breath caught. The photograph showed a woman with warm, intelligent eyes and a radiant smile, her arm linked through a younger Julian's. There was an undeniable resemblance to Ilara, not in specific features, but in a certain light in her eyes, a sense of spiritedness. She was an art historian. Julian continued, his voice quiet. Passionate, idealistic. She believed art could change the world. She had an unshakable moral compass. He looked directly at Ilara. Much like you. Suddenly, pieces began to click into place. The questions about her dreams, the interest in her views on integrity, the reference to someone whose clarity had become clouded. Livia and I started a foundation, Julian went on. The Serafina Foundation, named after this island, our sanctuary. Its mission was to support emerging artists, to fund art education in underserved communities, to preserve cultural heritage. The very things you spoke of, Ilara. His voice grew heavy with sorrow. But as my businesses grew, as our wealth accumulated, things became complicated. The foundation became a target for opportunists, for those who saw it as a way to curry favor, to gain access. Livia. She fought to protect its integrity, but the pressures were immense. She became disillusioned, wary. She started to make compromises she once would have deemed unthinkable, all in the name of practicality or playing the game to achieve the greater good. The light in her eyes. It began to dim. He paused, his gaze distant. Livia passed away 5 years ago. A sailing accident. But in many ways I felt I had lost her long before that, to the corrosive influence of the world I inhabit. Mr. Tanaka finally spoke, his voice gentle but firm. For years, Julian-san has searched for someone to help revitalize the Serafina Foundation, someone with not only the passion and knowledge, but with the intrinsic strength of character to withstand the pressures that Livia struggled with. Ilara felt a wave of dizziness. You brought me here because of Livia. Not just because of Livia, Julian said, his eyes pleading for understanding, but because of what she represented, what she lost. When you stood up to me in Aurelia Ilara for a principle as simple as fairness, when you showed no fear, no sycophancy, it was like hearing an echo of Livia's voice from long ago, before the world got to her. This island, this investigation, Ilara said, her mind reeling. It was all a test to see if I was worthy. A surge of indignation rose within her. Had her genuine emotions, her vulnerabilities all been part of some elaborate vetting process? A test, yes, Julian admitted, his expression pained. Perhaps a clumsy one, but how else could I know my world is filled with masks, Ilara? I needed to see the person behind yours. I needed to see if your integrity was a performance, or if it was an integral part of who you are. Tanaka-san has been my advisor in this observing you, as well helping me to see beyond my own biases. So the conversations, the questions, even Mr. Tanaka's arrival, it was all orchestrated. The framework was orchestrated, yes, Julian conceded. But your responses, your actions, your choices, those were entirely your own. Your hike today with Kai, for instance. He has been a confidant for years. He reported that you showed resilience, curiosity, and a deep appreciation for the natural, unvarnished beauty of the island, qualities Livia also cherished. Ilara felt a confusing mix of emotions, anger at the deception, but also a strange sense of understanding, even empathy for this lonely, powerful man, haunted by loss and searching for a way to honor his wife's legacy. And what now? Ilara asked, her voice trembling slightly. What is it you want from me? Julian. Julian Croft took a deep breath. I want to offer you the position of Executive Director of the Serafina Foundation Ilara, with full autonomy, with the resources to bring your and Livia's vision to life, to fund those artists, create those spaces, champion that education you spoke of so passionately. He named a salary that was astronomical, coupled with a budget for the foundation that could genuinely change lives. It's a chance to do real good on a significant scale. He stepped closer, but it comes with a warning. The world you would enter is seductive and treacherous. There will be temptations. There will be people who try to manipulate you, to use you, to corrupt the Foundation's mission for their own gain. The same forces that wore Livia down. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a desperate hope. The question, Elara, is not just whether you are capable. I believe you are. Tanaka-san believes you are. The question is, do you have the fortitude to remain unchanged, to hold on to that core of integrity, that clarity you possess now, even when faced with immense power and influence? The silence in the room was profound, broken only by the distant sound of the waves. Elara looked from Julian's earnest, searching face to Mr. Tanaka's calm, watchful eyes. This was the real precipice. Not a physical cliff, but a moral one. The offer was staggering. A chance to live her wildest dreams, to make a genuine difference in the world. But the price, or rather the risk, was equally immense, the potential loss of herself. She thought of her cramped apartment, her dusty degree, the endless shifts at Aurelia. She thought of the vibrant beauty of the waterfall, the quiet dignity of the old chapel, and the profound sadness in Julian Croft's eyes when he spoke of his lost wife. This wasn't just about a job. It was about a legacy. It was about a test far greater than any Julian had consciously devised. It was a test of her soul. I need to think, she finally whispered, her mind a whirlwind. Julian nodded slowly. Of course. Take all the time you need. Serafina Isle is quiet tonight. Perhaps it will offer you some clarity. He turned back to the photograph of Livia, his shoulders slumping slightly, the weight of his hope, his fear and his past pressing down on him. Elara walked out of the study, the setting sun casting long, dramatic shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns. Paradise had revealed its hidden heart and its complex, demanding truth. The choice before her was monumental, capable of shaping not only her future, but the futures of countless others. And as the first stars began to prick the darkening sky over Serafina Isle, Elara Vance knew that her answer would define the rest of her life. Elara didn't sleep. The luxurious suite, which had initially felt like a dream, now seemed like a beautifully appointed holding cell, its silence amplifying the turmoil in her mind. She paced the veranda, the rhythmic shush of the waves, a counterpoint to her racing thoughts. Julian Croft's offer replayed in her mind, the incredible opportunity, the daunting responsibility, the ghost of Livia, and the implicit warning. Was she strong enough? Could she navigate a world of such immense wealth and influence without losing herself as Livia apparently had? The cynicism she'd cultivated as a shield for so long warred with the idealism she thought she'd buried. To be given the chance to truly act on her dreams, to make a tangible difference in the art world she loved and despaired of in equal measure. It was almost too much to comprehend. She thought of her defiance in Aurelia. It hadn't been a calculated move. It had been an instinctive reaction against unfairness. Could she maintain that same instinctive moral clarity when the stakes were so much higher, when the compromises were presented not as bullying demands, but as seductive whispers of practicality and the greater good? As dawn approached, painting the sky in hues of soft lavender and rose, Elara found herself drawn back to the small, weathered stone chapel she'd discovered. In the quiet solitude of that ancient place, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the waking island, A sense of calm began to settle over her. She looked at the simple altar, the faded frescoes, the enduring stone, things that had weathered centuries of storms. Integrity wasn't about being impervious to temptation, she realized. It was about having a core, a foundation, so strong that even if you bent, you wouldn't break. It was about remembering why you started what truly mattered. Livia had lost her way, perhaps because she had felt alone in her fight. When the sun finally breached the horizon, casting a golden glow over Serafina Isle, Ilara had made her decision. She found Julian on the main veranda, staring out at the ocean, a solitary figure against the vast expanse. He looked as if he hadn't slept either. Mr. Tanaka sat nearby, sipping tea, his expression serene. "Julian," Ilara said, her voice clear and steady. He turned his eyes, searching hers, filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "I've thought about your offer," she began. "It's more than I ever could have imagined." She took a deep breath. "And I accept, on one condition." A flicker of surprise crossed Julian's face. "A condition?" "Yes," Ilara affirmed. "I won't do this alone." The Serafina Foundation was Livia's dream and yours. If I am to be its steward, I want you involved, Julian. Not just as a benefactor who writes checks from a distance, but as an active partner. Your experience, your understanding of the world we'll be navigating will be invaluable. But more importantly, your passion for Livia's original vision needs to be part of its new life. The foundation shouldn't just be her memorial. It should be a living, breathing entity that reflects both her ideals and your commitment to them. She also looked at Mr. Tanaka. "And if he is willing, I would want Mr. Tanaka as an advisor, a guiding counsel. Wisdom and diverse perspectives will be crucial." Julian stared at her, momentarily speechless. Then a slow smile spread across his face. A genuine smile, one that reached his eyes and seemed to lift some of the weariness from him. "Ilara, that is not a condition I would ever refuse. It would be my honor." Mr. Tanaka inclined his head. "It would be a privilege, Ms. Vance, to offer what counsel I can." Relief profound and cleansing washed over Ilara. This wasn't just her taking on a monumental task. It was them together forging a new path. "There's something else," Ilara continued, feeling a newfound confidence. "The headquarters of the Serafina Foundation. I don't want it in some gleaming, sterile corporate tower in Manhattan." She thought of the vibrant, gritty streets of her own neighborhood, the struggling artists, the communities hungry for beauty and connection. "I want it to be accessible, grounded. Perhaps we could even restore an old, forgotten building in a neighborhood that needs it. Make the space itself a testament to art's power to rejuvenate." Julian's smile widened. "I believe Livia would have adored that idea." He extended his hand, not as a billionaire to a waitress, but as one partner to another. "Welcome Ilara Vance to the Serafina Foundation." As Ilara shook his hand, the future felt vast and exhilarating, filled with challenges, yes, but also with immense possibility. Her journey from the bustling floor of Aurelia to the tranquil shores of Serafina Isle had been more than just a change of scenery. It had been a journey of self-discovery, a confrontation with a world she never knew existed, and the first step towards a life of profound purpose. The island had been a test, but it had also been a catalyst, stripping away her cynicism and revealing the resilient core of her dreams. The story of the waitress who told a billionaire to wait his turn wouldn't end with a trip to a private island. It was just beginning. She wouldn't just be preserving beauty. She would be designing a new future for herself, for the foundation and for the countless lives they hoped to touch. And perhaps in doing so, she would help Julian Croft find his own way back to the light that had been dimmed for too long. The real treasure of Serafina Isle wasn't its luxury, but the spark of hope and integrity it had rekindled. Ilara's incredible journey from the demanding tables of Aurelia to the helm of the Serafina Foundation is a testament to the power of integrity and the unexpected paths life can take. She faced a world of unimaginable wealth and influence, not with greed, but with a steadfast commitment to her principles. Her story reminds us that true strength isn't about the power you wield, but the character you maintain when tested. What started with a simple act of courage, telling a billionaire to wait, blossomed into an opportunity to change the world. One brushstroke, one empowered artist, one revitalized community at a time. What did you think of Ilara's choice? Could you have resisted the allure of paradise? Or would you have embraced the challenge? Let us know in the comments below. If you were captivated by Ilara's story of courage and unexpected destiny, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of incredible transformations and inspiring journeys. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life.